Have you ever stopped to think about what the walls of your home would say if they could talk? Seriously, they wouldn't just tell your story, they'd tell the story of an entire nation. So today, let's pull back the drywall and explore the incredible, century-long transformation of the American home.
And that's really the heart of it, isn't it? A home has never, ever been just a shelter. It's a mirror. It reflects our economy, our values, our biggest ambitions, and yeah, even our anxieties. It's the place where the American dream gets built, one brick at a time. So we're going to take a journey through 4 key moments. We'll kick things off at the turn of the century with a dream that almost no one could afford. Then we'll see how a huge crisis completely reinvented that dream, watch it literally explode across the landscape, and finally, we'll try to understand the complex compromises we all live with today.
So where does a story like this even begin? You'd think the whole idea of home ownership being the cornerstone of American life was born out of good times, right? Out of prosperity? Well, it was actually forged in the fires of a massive national crisis.
I mean, just look at this. It's kind of startling to see how different reality was from what we expect today. Back at the turn of the 20th century, the typical American home was, well, incredibly basic. Out in the country, families often built their own small wooden houses by hand. In the cities, workers were packed into these tiny rental apartments. Forget smart homes. Most places didn't even have running water or electricity. Okay, get this. $2,500. Now, I know, that sounds ridiculously cheap to us. But for most families back then, it was an absolute fortune. Homeownership wasn't some middle-class rite of passage. It was a luxury reserved for a very, very small group of people.
Then the Roaring '20s hit, and with them, this huge wave of optimism. Suddenly, cars made it possible to live outside the city, which gave birth to the very first suburbs. Homes started getting things we totally take for granted, like electric lights. It really felt like the dream was finally within reach for more people, but the whole thing was built on a very fragile foundation. And then, that foundation just crumbled. The Great Depression hit, and the housing market completely collapsed. Foreclosures went through the roof. Millions of families lost everything. I mean, you had people forced to double or triple up in single homes just to survive. It was a national catastrophe.
But out of this absolute crisis came a revolutionary idea. The government itself stepped in. They created something called the Federal Housing Administration, or the FHA. Its job, basically, was to stop the financial bleeding and completely redesign how Americans bought their homes.
And here is the real game changer. The FHA introduced the long-term, low down payment mortgage. See, before this, you needed a giant down payment, and you had to pay the loan back in just a few years. It was almost impossible. But the FHA, well, it suddenly made buying a home possible for the average family. It totally reshaped the future of American housing.
All right, so we've got this new financial foundation, right, forged during the Depression. Now let's see what happens when you pour gasoline on that fire right after World War II.
After the war, millions of soldiers came home, all ready to start families. They needed places to live, and they needed them fast. And then the GI Bill came along and just supercharged the FHA's model, making home loans incredibly easy for veterans to get. It was the perfect storm. You had massive demand, meeting a massive opportunity.
And the solution they came up with? It was brilliant. Mass production. Developers like Levitt and Sons basically took the assembly line model and applied it to building houses. In places like Levittown, New York, they weren't just building houses. They were building entire communities at a speed nobody had ever seen before.
And the price tag? For about $8,000, a young family could buy a brand new house. It was affordable, it was new, and for an entire generation, it was the physical proof of post-war peace and prosperity.
In this image, it became absolutely iconic. The single-family home out in the suburbs wasn't just a place to live anymore. It became the centerpiece of the new American identity. It meant stability, family, success, the whole shebang.
But you know how these things go. That golden age couldn't last forever. As we move into the later part of the century, the dream starts to get a lot more complicated and a whole lot more expensive.
Just look at this chart. I mean, the numbers really speak for themselves. From $8,000 in the 50s, the average price jumps 5-fold to $40,000 by the 70s. And then, by the year 2000, it triples again to $120,000. The dream was rapidly inflating.
So what was going on? Well, the 1970s brought this punishing inflation. All of a sudden, it wasn't just the price of the house that was the problem. The mortgage rates, that's the cost of borrowing the money, shot up to these shocking levels.
We're talking sometimes as high as 15%. The dream became a real struggle again, and a lot of people were pushed back into renting.
And this brings us to what you could call the modern trade-off. By the time we hit the 21st century, our homes were objectively way better. They were bigger, they were safer, they were filled with tech, open-plan kitchens, home offices, you name it. But this new standard of living came with a really hefty price tag, not just in dollars, but in debt. Our homes started to reflect both our incredible national wealth and this deep, underlying economic anxiety.
So, after this whole journey from what were basically log cabins to these high-tech homes, what does it all mean? What does this century of housing really tell us about America? This slide really puts it all in perspective. We went from a nation of rural, hand-built homes with no basic plumbing or electricity to one of suburban, mass-produced homes that are smart and connected. But the most telling change might just be this. We went from a time when owning a home was a rare dream to a time when owning a home almost always means taking on a significant amount of debt.
Ultimately, our homes really are America's mirror. They show us that owning a home has always been this powerful symbol of stability and success. They prove that our biggest national challenges, from the Great Depression to World War II, have fundamentally reshaped how and where we live. And maybe most importantly, they show that the way we live truly reflects who we are as a nation.
And all of that leaves us with one final, fascinating question. As we face brand new challenges, from climate change to remote work to who knows what else, how will our homes adapt? What story will they tell about us in the next 100 years?